Okay, so today is December 8th,
Right.
2021. We're here with Terence Edward Price. My name is Lydia Wen. I'm one of the librarians at Glen Cove Public Library. Our other interviewer is Carol Stern. We are at Robert R. Cole's History Room, part of the Glen Cove Public Library in Glen Cove, New York. We have the great opportunity to interview Terry about his experiences during Vietnam War. So Terry, let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where were you born? Where were your parents? Who were your parents? What were their occupations?
I was born in Glen Cove Hospital in 1943, and my father passed away about 7 or 8 months after I was born, and then my mother remarried. I lived in Jersey for a while. I lived up in the Landing for a little while. My oldest sister had polio, so we were scattered. My young sister, I'm the baby of the family. My sister, who was kind of with me, was 3 years older, so we were put in different places with foster homes for a little while. Then we got together back in Glen Cove. My mother got remarried in Nevada, where my oldest sister lived, because that's when you could get quickie divorces, and my stepfather was married. So I was about 2 or 3 when they got married. They came back east. We were out there, my sister and I, on the ranch, and when we came back, we moved to Brookville. And my mother was a cook on the estate. That's why I'm a great cook today. I don't mind saying that. I really learned a lot early on. And my father had been a mechanic for Rolls-Royce, and they wanted him to become the chief salesman on the East Coast at the time, because they were just starting to push in New York. But he loved the mechanic aspect of it, so he didn't want to be a salesperson. So he got a job as a chauffeur out on the estate and did work on cars. And that's where I grew up. Went to Brookville School, which no longer exists, but it was in Brookville, and then to Oyster Bay High School, and then to C.W. Post College, and then to the U.S. military.
Why were you put in foster care?
Because my older sister had polio, and she was having a baby, and so she was up in a special facility in Haverstraw, upstate in the Catskills. So my mother couldn't take care of all of us, my sister and I, and her up there with a new baby. So we were boarded, we called it boarded out. And the lovely lady in Glen Cove who took us both, I went with my uncle and aunt in New Jersey for a little while, but my mother wanted my sister and I back. So she boarded us in the Landing with Mrs. Bursanevich, who was a wonderful, magical woman. And we spent a couple years there before going out west to my mother getting remarried.
Do you actually remember any of this, or all these experiences are told to you?
I remember, and I tell stories about it. As a teacher, as a history teacher, I learned pretty early on, don't teach a lot of history, tell stories that involve history. So I would tell stories about my childhood, which for these kids, 10 years ago it's history. It's in the 50s, that's ancient to them. So you could tell stories. So I told a lot of stories about my life while teaching history. So that's it, I don't know.
It's interesting.
What were your parents or siblings' feelings about you joining the service?
Well, my parents were both passed away. My stepfather, I was about 19. About 19. And then just before I went in the military, my mother had passed away. So, which was a whole different story. But so they weren't there. My brothers had both been in the war, in World War II. So they were veterans, and my sister, they just said, you do what you have to do and do what you want to do. There wasn't any question about me going. My family had a long history. My grandfather was in the military. My father, my brothers.
So there was a tradition.
Kind of assumed. Yeah, it was tradition. And at that point, I didn't want to go. I was in college, and I spent another half year figuring, this will be over. We're the United States of America. We're fighting these runaround guys in the jungle. This will be done. So I extended, but it wasn't done. So I went in. I enlisted to go to officers' candidate school.
Did you have any jobs before you joined?
Yeah, started working when I was about 8 or 9 on the estate. pulling weeds, raking, cleaning, you know, so I could get a portable radio, which was this big in those days, saving up the whole summer. And then I worked at a grocery store in Glen Head, which is now some other building, and then bartender, and for a lot of time, and worked for Lilco. It was Lilco in those days.
I remember
And I
that.
worked for the sub company Asplin, which was then a very small company. Now it's like worldwide. But I would run tools and chip up branches and stuff. And that was pretty much just college type jobs, nothing permanent. I had a boys camp my 8th grade year. I took care of little boys from around Brookville whose parents didn't want to send them away for the summer, so I had 7 boys, I think, in the camp. It was fun. A lot of exploring.
So were you drafted or were you
No,
enlisted?
it was before the number system came out, but I knew I was going to be going anyway. So my brothers had said, go ahead and enlist to go to Officers Candidate School. They were both not officers, they were enlisted. And they said, you'll have at least some choices you'll be able to make. You won't control much, but you'll more than they did. So they said, if you can do it, go to OCS. So I went to see the recruiter, and I said, look, I'd like to go into the Adjutant General Corps somehow. He said, no problem, we'll get you in there. You just have to go to Infantry OCS to go through that path. So when I got into going into them, and I told, I was going to go to AGC, when I got down there at the school, they said, yeah, that's what they tell everybody. These guys get bonuses to get you in. So, of course he promised you that. He says, you're probably not going to go AGC.
So why did you choose that branch?
Infantry Army?
Yeah.
I always, I guess as a kid, there was a show on television. We only had a little bit of television, of course, but it was the long West Point story or something. It was a weekly series, and I loved the idea. My father had been in West Point during World War I. He actually started there, but he left under not so great reasons. But he left, and he was in there. But I always wanted to go to West Point in the Army, so I didn't think about the Navy. I didn't want to be out on the water much. I grew up on Long Island. I don't need to be on more water. So the Army seemed what I would want to do, and I enlisted to them, and they sent me. So.
And your brothers were also in the
Army?
Army?
One brother was in the Army Air Corps. They're much older. They're all gone now, except the one sister. And so he was in the Army Air Corps, and my other brother was in the Navy. One in the Pacific and one in North Africa.
So what was your point of entry, initial point of entry?
Where I went into the service, I was sworn in I went to Whitehall Street, that's where they did the physicals in those days, and then I went over to the fort by the Brooklyn, by the Verrazano, is it Fort Hamilton? I'm not sure. It was a fort, that's where I was sworn in to go into the service. And in those days, they were drafting very heavily. So when you got online, I just tell the side story. When you got online, the guy who was the officer down there said, okay, Army Marines. They were drafting Marines, and I says, Army Marine, Army Marine. Just bum, bum, bum. So the guy, he comes to me, he says, Marine. So the guy in back is going, whew. I heard him go, whew. I said, I have orders for OCS. He says, okay, Army, Marine. I looked at this poor guy. I don't know whatever happened to his life, but
really arbitrary.
it was just so bizarre to look around. He was not happy.
So what was the training like when you went to the school? Like what do they teach you? How
You
is that
started
different than a
in-
draft? When they just draft, does everybody have to go through this
Oh
training?
yeah, you all go through basic training for 8 weeks, advanced, whatever school you're in, infantry, engineering, or whatever it might be. And then you go to your assignment. I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Columbia is the city. And I went down there for basic and advanced infantry training. So it was 8 weeks, and then I got my orders for Officers Candidate School, which was in Benning, Fort Benning. So you do 6 months at Officers Candidate School, and then you graduate and get your commission, and you're assigned a duty assignment. And mine was to be a psychological operations officer. I was still infantry, and my MOS is what your job title is, and so I was still infantry, but I got assigned War Battalion in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, outside of Fayetteville.
How do you think that happened, that you got into?
Probably because I needed glasses. I have now the corrective lenses in, and they didn't want me to stay in OCS. And this is how crazy it gets in the military. They didn't want you. They wanted me to get out while I was in OCS, says, your eyes are really bad. You know, we'll stay in the military, but put you to something else. And I begged, because by 5 months of going through ridiculous things, I'd become very tight with all the guys. You know, it happens. It's like a team. So I begged them to let me stay in. So they said, okay, but when they made the final decision, at the end, I guess because I had also graduated college by this time, so they said, well, we're going to put you into an outfit that is infantry, but you'll have more responsibilities. So they chose that, and I said, okay.
That was a good thing, though. I mean, that's
But,
that was a good thing, no?
oh yeah, I mean, I didn't think so when I was dying to stay with the infantry and I was
Yeah.
gung-ho, but getting through everything and over to Vietnam and coming back to the United States, yeah, I was very fortunate in my experiences because I had some bad parts like every GI has, but for my job, I had a lot of great things and some wonderful friendships in Vietnam, but I wouldn't want anybody to go through.
So what did you do for your job? Like, what were your responsibilities?
I was a propaganda officer, which meant we would, there were many different jobs. One was in Vietnam, when we got there, to develop, hopefully, good relations between the Vietnamese and the American soldiers who were there, between the Vietnamese and the Korean soldiers who were partners with my team, and Vietnamese and the Montagnards who were the hill people. So we had a lot of programs designed to bring people together. That was one major goal. And then on military operations, we would go out to villages and take teams, medical teams, dental teams, whatever we had, and pacify the people, trying to convince them to stay on the government South Vietnamese side. And a lot of programs, instructional programs, but a lot of giveaway stuff. And so you went to different villages, and then it was a separate program with the Montagnards, the hill people who were there. And the other one was the Chu Hoi, try to get the enemy to surrender. They were called Hoi Chans, the ones who surrendered. But the Chu Hoi program was convince the enemy, that's where we used a lot of these leaflets, to surrender rather than continue fighting, etc. So a lot of my time was due to a brilliant sergeant I had, Sergeant Holland, who developed this take a prisoner to lunch program. We'd go up to the POW compound, take a prisoner out, and take them to lunch. And we did other things which I really can't talk about with them if they enjoyed certain things. So we would try to set them up with whatever we could to get information from them and use it. And I don't know if it's time, but this is like, in one of the guys, this guy we had, he was a prisoner of war. And he came out, we took him out to lunch, a nice guy, young guy, had a kid up in the north, baby. And talking to him was probably the biggest turning point that I had in the military, because the way he talked about, he didn't know why he was there, like a lot of GIs. You went to fight, your country said you got to go to this war. But he didn't know really what he was doing. He had no connection to the South. And he missed his family. And sitting through that time we were at lunch and listening to him, Sergeant Holland was a great language expert. I know Vietnamese, but not as well. And I looked and I started thinking about the you wouldn't know, you're too young. Buffy St. Marie was a great singer who sang The Universal Soldier. It was a great song. And so I thought about it and I said, you know, this is another person just like the guys I met from Iowa or Harlem or LA. They don't know why they're there. They're in the military and they go, but they don't understand a lot. Just go out and shoot somebody for what reason? And I saw that this is like the enemy is becoming a friend. And that's the thing that the military never wants you to do. That's the biggest thing.
Friends.
You have to keep them as the enemy. So.
Well, you mentioned an instructor that really stuck out in your mind and how brilliant he was. Can you talk a little bit about other instructors that you had during training?
Yeah, I had, at jump school, you have a 3-week jump school to get your parachute badge back at Fort Bragg. And the sergeants who ran that, who all had beer bellies and were older and could run around us while we're running around the track. They were very tough, really good guys. The language instructor, the language army schools are very good, but we had a Vietnamese lady who came and taught us for 3 months. And so that part of the day, when you went to language training, you had to speak nothing but Vietnamese.
Wow.
And I learned a lot from her.
You can speak fluent Vietnamese?
Not anymore. I couldn't speak fluent, but I could get enough information across back and forth through her training. The unfortunate part was that she was from the north, So when I was speaking to groups of people down the south, they were like, how come you're speaking Northern Vietnamese?
Regional dialects are different.
Yeah, it's like if I'm from
Yeah.
Alabama and I talk to somebody in Massachusetts, you can pick it up pretty quick.
Right.
Well, they knew pretty quick, you're trained by the North, huh? I said, yeah, but I'm not a Northerner.
So the training was oral. It wasn't
Oral.
written.
No, this
right.
was all oral. You spoke nothing but Vietnamese. From day one, whatever you had to do, you had to figure it out. You had sheets and words, so you had to look it up and tell her. The most impressive part was, though, she was from Vietnam, so one day, it was the middle of winter, it started snowing, and we're looking around, and she's looking, and she's like, they didn't even have a word for Vietnamese, for snow in Vietnamese. So we took her outside, and we stood there watching her, and it was just a joy to watch somebody who's never experienced something like that, to see her looking and wondering, and just, we told her, put your tongue out, you know, all that. And that was probably the most important part of it to me. I learned enough Vietnamese to where when I'd be at a meeting with province people, when there was a special meeting that I'd have to be at, they would find out after I would say something that I knew some Vietnamese. So that would change the tone of the meeting a lot, because some of them were involving political connections, corruption type of things. You know, whose wife is going to lose the most money to whoever will become the provincial governor. So the governors sent their wives to play poker, and if you lost the most money to, you know, and gave it to the woman whose husband would become, and I started, they were doing it and arranging it, and I said, is this the right thing to do? You speak Vietnamese? Yes. Oh, well, okay, we're going to change the meeting type of thing. So it came in handy once in a while, and of course, just meeting people.
The only
Vietnamese.
people who got the language training were from the propaganda.
Oh, there were other, yeah, because units would have to have interpreters. So interpreters were there also at the school, translators and interpreters. And they would have it. So most units had somebody trained. Now, this was a small one. Most Army training was out, for language school was out in California, though, the big schools. We were going to a very special one just at Fort Bragg.
So what is your most vivid memory of your time training or in school? What was the best part? What was the worst
trainings,
part?
A jump school was scary for me. Exciting though. I was a lieutenant, so I had to sit at the right next to the door. It's called the one side is a stick. You're in the left or right stick, and you jump out. And the first jump we had after 3 weeks of training and getting nervous and everything, we were up, and I had to stand in the door. And when you stand in the door like this, and they pat you on the butt, means you go, because there's a red and green light up here, but you can't see that. You're looking out. So I'm looking out over the countryside in Fort Bragg, outside of Fayetteville, and I'm just all getting so nervous. And then he says, "Okay, we're going to hit the drop zone in about 10, 15 seconds." And I'm ready a minute. And then he goes, "Ready?" And then no slap, and he says, "It's called. Jump is called." Too much wind had come up on the drop zone. It wasn't safe. But when that happened, I had to sit back down. And if I hadn't jumped, maybe would. But I was in the door. I was looking. The guys were in their
How high
sticks.
up are you?
1,750 feet, most of the jumps. Around 2,000, some of them feet. And you're on static line, so your chute is pulled if you're lucky. You know, you hope it does. But only twice I think that I ever jumped, I saw someone shoot who didn't open, and you have this reserve to throw. But after he said no jump, all the guys were so nervous and upset they just started to throw up. And they had puke bags. And so I, unfortunately, as a lieutenant sitting at the end, I had to take all the puke bags which were handed down, and we just threw them out over the countryside. But that was not fun. But Jungle School was the other great school. The Jungle School was a school of the Americas in Panama. And that was 3 weeks, I think. And you go out and you live in the jungle. You're trained by San Blas Indians. And you learn how to live in the jungle, what to do. They have different things. They have an escape and evasion course you run through. And you learn, which my wife always gets mad about. Whenever I see a movie on television or something like that, and I see these guys with their machetes hacking, I said, it's the first thing the Indians teach you. You don't take your machete out, not in the jungle. You do it at the campsite to clear an area. Because if you start cutting through the jungle, you could very easily hit somebody in back of you, or you're going to get so tired from doing that, so you're going to just pass out. They said you go through the jungle like this. So learning that lesson, learning how to recognize the poisons from non-poisons was important. And just getting time every once in a while other guys in the team were doing something, you'd have 15 or 20 minutes just to sit and just love the jungle, the colors, you know, the animals, everything out there. It was a beautiful experience, great time.
So it wasn't difficult to adapt to this or anything, like you went and you just did it and
I guess it
you didn't
depends
think about
on
it much.
your childhood, maybe. I lived on a 400-acre estate, so I was always out in the woods. I went to the Adirondacks from when I was camping from when I was about 6 or 7 years old, so I'd always been in the woods and mountains, so I was pretty comfortable. But a lot of guys weren't. It was very hard because they hadn't been out. They maybe come from New York or you come from Davenport, Iowa, but you haven't been in a jungle. You may have been camping in the mountains once. But for me, I had a lot of background, so I was nervous at certain times. The worst was, going on too much, there was a snake in the jungles called the fer de lance, which is, it's got that head, like a lance's head. But it's a highly neurotoxic snake, so it attacks the nervous system. You're pretty much dead if you get bitten by it. There's not much hope. In Vietnam, that was the two-stepper, we called it, and that was a big danger. But there was a fer de lance. We're out camping. We set up a campsite with the Indians, and a guy comes in who'd been off going to the bathroom, I think, and he killed with his machete he took with him, he killed the fer de lance.
Yeah.
And he brought it back. Look, I got one of these. And I remember turning and looking at the Sound Blast Indians, and they were like the horror. He said, "Where's the other one?" He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "They travel in pairs.
Oh,
and if you
gosh.
kill one, the other one will come after you eventually. They'll track you for as long as they can keep up with you." So they went off and killed the other one.
Well, they found it, they tracked
They
it.
found it, yeah, because that other one was waiting around, you know, to do something. But
How big are these? How,
they can, well, like any snake, they can be like, you know, this big, or they could be probably big. That's pretty much as big as they get. But the poison is, again, is a neurotoxic, not
Wow.
hemotoxic. So, but jungle school was a wonderful experience. Jump school was okay. It was a lot of hard work. Then language school was good, and then we went to War school to learn psychological operations. Saw a lot of German propaganda films during that time, studying those. And all that was at Fort Bragg, coming out of there. So I had gone from an enlisted, you know, nobody with a little pin on my hat, and then you go to first training, you can become a private, then a private first class. When you go to OCS, you start off as a E3, and you work your way up to enlisted 3 up to enlisted 5. 5 is a buck sergeant. So you've gone from corporal up to buck sergeant at OCS. Then as soon as you graduate, you become a commissioned officer.
and this is 3 years? How many years was
In
it?
the service, about 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
did you receive any promotions?
Oh yeah.
Could you tell us about them?
Enlisted 1 through enlisted 5, and then I got my commission as a second lieutenant, and then I processed out as a first lieutenant. I was offered, like most who are living when you come out of Vietnam, you're offered the captain's job, but I didn't want any more. But I'd had enough by then. I said, I'm not coming back here. They said, we'll offer you the captain's position. You'll either go to Thailand, or you'll go back to the States and be a company commander somewhere, and then you'll be back in Vietnam in another year and a half. I said, nah, I got through one time. I'm not trying it again.
So you mentioned that when you went to jungle school, it wasn't as difficult for you because you had some experience
I
camping.
think that was the most part, yeah.
But what was the hardest part of military life for you to adjust to, and why do you think that was?
Probably OCS. I mean, my parents were, I think, you know, as strict as any parents in the 50s were, and, you know, but nothing crazy. But at OCS, to be so limited that you have to do things that make no sense at all to you at all. Spit shining, literally spit shining your floors, only for the TAC officer, the ones who are training you, to come in like an hour after you've done that and come in and look at your room and then do what we call cartwheels. They spin around, so they leave this. You have to go back and spit shine your floor. Get up, spit shine your floor again early in the morning, go out to physical training, come back, do more exercises, then go to breakfast, and then the rest of the day is, and these TAC officers are always, you know, you can never do anything right. So you always have to do push-ups. I mean, my arms were in great shape when I came out of there, and I'd lost a pretty good amount of weight. But it was I guess having someone constantly telling you what to do and what things that didn't make much sense. They stopped the spit shining of the floors, not the boots, but they stopped the floors about halfway through OCS, they had stopped because they were losing guys because it was all so crazy. The whole purpose of infantry OCS was to put so much pressure on you that they could crack you there rather than on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So I had never been one subject to much discipline in that regard, and that was AIT and basic kind of expected, but this was 6 months of, just stop telling me these things to do.
It seems grueling. I mean, it's.
It was tough, but it was, you learned a lot, and you learned your buddies and stuff like that. But you graduate and you start at the bottom of the next rung. As
So,
a
you
second
look
lieutenant.
back in life and you say, would I do this again? Would I not do this again? Would this be an experience that you would have done at shows again, or
I wouldn't do it again. No.
you would do it again?
I would not do it again. I'm very. When I came back from Vietnam, I joined the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. Not only did I see Vietnam getting destroyed, I saw America. This was '69,
Right in the
and
middle of it.
we got booed at the airport. Now I could understand it, and called baby killers and all that. But I was older, had been through college stuff. But for a lot of these young guys who were 19, coming back, 20, never been many places and thought they were doing a good job for their country, to be called a baby killer and booed when you land at the base in Oakland is hard. But I saw what was going on back here too. So I joined the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I went down as a parade marshal on the big moratorium, which was really amazing experience. But I work as hard as I can to try to convince people that there's no real. I understand we have that, but whatever we can do, it should be the last step ever, and we have to look at everybody as an earthling. I'd say if I can get that message to some people, because we can't. We don't understand how fragile we are as a planet. If more people could accept that and not kill each other for.
I think this is why it's
terrible
so
reasons.
important to do oral histories, and I think this is why Library of Congress has this project, the Veterans History Project, so that you can tell your story. You can tell your story from what basic training was like, what your service was like, what was it like afterwards, and then your reflection, decades later.
Well, I met a lot of great people, and they had great programs for different things. But again, the whole end of it no longer makes any sense to me at all.
Did you feel that way when you were actually sent to Vietnam, when you were in Vietnam?
No, I didn't feel as strong. I wanted to evade. I didn't really want to go to Vietnam, but that was what was going to happen. So it was inevitable. That's why I went to jungle school, jump school. I never got to jump in Vietnam. I lost that right in a poker game. But I was playing.
There's a story there.
I was at. You want me to tell it now? It was at the Special Forces Club. They had club, and they had a little unit. I was attached to the 5th Special Forces over there, outside of my primary unit. So we were playing cards up there one night, and I had 4 threes, I think, and it was like 7 or 8 of us. And there was a major who kept betting and betting heavy. So he was a career being a major, and I saw his little wings. But we're betting, and I had this great hand. We're playing 5 card too, which is a much narrower chance of getting 4 of a kind. So he said, I'm going to bet like $30, which was a lot of money back then to me as in the military. I said, I'm out. I said, but I see you're airborne too. He said, I have orders cut for a jump that was going to happen in Vietnam. It's a relatively safe jump. They only planned a few of them. But if you jumped, you get a star on your badge. You know what the badge looks like. This on your wings. These are regular, but this is your jump school, and you have a star. That means you've jumped in combat, so that's highly prestigious. So I said, I'll look. I have orders. I'll have my XO cut them out to you if you'd like them, sir. He said, oh yeah. I said, okay. So I put those. He had 4 7s. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
But I mean, I didn't want to jump, but that's all I had. So I lost it. I don't know whatever happened to him, but.
That's a great story.
It's a heck of a poker game.
So you have all this training. You've been to jump school, jungle school, language school. What was your first assignment after basic training?
After basic was
I mean,
advanced
after
infantry.
all those training, yes.
In Vietnam I was at Fort Bragg for a year doing the schools and learning propaganda stuff. Then I got assigned to take a ship. We took the last troop ship over to Vietnam. I had 285 men who were going to be distributed through the 4 core zones, from the demilitarized zone down to the south. And so we were taking the men over on the USMS Pope. It was the last troop ship to go. And I was the executive officer, and my buddy Joe Owens, who was a roommate of mine, was the commanding officer, because the alphabet went OP. So it was Owens and Price, so I got to be exec. So we got there, we dropped the 3 corps zones off, and then we ended up in a place called Cameron Bay. And we got on a bus and went into Nha Trang, the city, and I was with the PSYOPs battalion there, the 8th, I think it was, PSYOPs battalion. And then I started going to villages and started doing different programs like that, working with Americans to, again, be more friendly with the Vietnamese. Don't ride them off the street, you know, if they're riding a bicycle, and bang them with your Jeep. It was just crazy sometimes. And I fully understand a lot of GIs. I wasn't through heavy combat. I was shot at a few times, but never heavy combat. So I can understand, though, having been around enough of it and seen enough and have to deal with the results of it, to understand these guys, a lot of these guys, again, 19 years old, 18, some lied about to get in. And they were angry. They were angry at anybody and angry at Vietnamese. So we tried to work small programs with that. And then go into the villages, try and talk to people. This I'll show you. We had leaflets like, this is a Christmas leaflet that we did for the villages, and it explained, because there were a lot of Catholics. This was actually the Catholic cathedral that my artist had drawn in Nha Trang. And at the cathedral, well, they call it a cathedral, it's a small church here, but at the cathedral there, they did Mass in Latin, Vietnamese, and French. So they did all of those because that's the groups. The French had been there so long. So we did this kind of propaganda leaflet for those people. So we bring these. We had other ones, but this was a little thing. This was a little television. You can't see much of anything, but if you look through there, you'll take a look and push the bottom. Hold it close to your eye. You'll see the theme of it going around is the VC, Viet Cong, come in, they're going to kill you, destroy your village. And then you see friendly Americans and South Vietnamese army, and they help rescue them. So this was dropped off in villages. And I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of dollars they spent in this program. It's just a copy of a television, and they had it done overseas, I think in Switzerland, where they were produced. And when we got them, the colonel was in charge, or came in and said, "Oh, these are going to be great. You're going to drop these off in the villages." So I had my interpreter translator, Ko Mai, Ko is girl, Ko Mai, and she looked at it and said, "I'm not sure who did the translation on this, but half of this is wrong."
Wow.
So we had to can that program, and that was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
But that was one of those types of programs. We had another program that failed. We had something called the Image Ray Projector, long tube, maybe about this long, had a very powerful light source in it, and you had slides that you put into the thing. And if you were out in an area, you would give directions to people or tell them you're the friendly side. And another colonel had developed this program. They already had it, and he came to test it with us. And I said, it's very, very nice. It's like Buck Rogers type of equipment. And Flash Gordon, he laughed. I said, "But sir, I'm going to have to reject in my letter about it." I said, because number one, there's very few high buildings in those days. You know, in Vietnam, now I look on House Hunters International, I go to one of the cities and it's all like the rest of the world. But there were no tall buildings. I said, and so I don't think it'd be very effective in the jungle at all, but mostly because whoever's operating it is beaming a light up. So the enemy can follow that light right back to the source, and I will not order my men to use this. So he kind of thought about it for a while, and they said, "Well, we'll find somebody who can put this to use." I said, "Good luck, sir." But we had crazy projects like those with the military. So much money wasted in there. But
So it seemed like you, in the propaganda department, you were changing minds of the enemy.
yeah, our motto is hearts and minds.
Hearts and minds, but you're also trying to change the behavior and minds of the soldiers as
Yeah,
well, of the
yeah.
GIs.
Yeah, there were essentially those two different programs. Three. That one, pacification, getting the Montagnards to become more Vietnamese supporting the South. The Montagnards were the hill people. And then the ralliers, like this guy who surrendered, and then we get information from. But the Montagnards were probably the most difficult to deal with.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because in your biographical
yeah.
form,
You can read that.
you wrote that they were enslaved.
Oh, that was
about
in,
the Viacon.
yeah, that was, oh, just, yeah, this is, show you
Yeah, if you
Oh,
can hold.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's fantastic. Yeah.
This is Mon Quang, who escaped what essentially was a slave labor camp. The North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong had enslaved the Montagnards. Montagnards were groups of small boons, villages, and they were maybe 100 people, 120, maybe 40. They were dotted throughout the mountains, and they spoke many different dialects. And they had been captured. Mon Quang escaped, came into a A-team hut somewhere, and they brought him down in a train. We started working with him to get his village out of captivity. So his wife had this baby just, a very short time ago. And so he was up with us in the plane. We were dropping leaflets. We were dropping leaflets telling that this was a friendly force coming in. The VC, will be dealt with by our military units. And it was a 2-day operation. And Mon Quang came up with us in the little plane. We had a session of push me, pull me, and it was the two of us, and Mon Quang was in the back, the Montagnard guy. So the second day, we got the ground people kept getting people out of there. There was some firefighting going on. The second day, we went in and we played spotter. One of our jobs, besides dropping leaflets and broadcast tapes to the enemy or villages or whatever, was also to spot. So if we got a request from a unit that was involved in a situation, we would go in, fly low, and Major Moses, Ken Moses was my pilot, great guy, and he said on the first flight we had, he said, 2 things I want to tell you. I'm going to teach you how to fly and how to land. I'm not going to teach you how to take off because I'll be living then. He said, but I may get killed, so you better know. So he told me that, and he said, the second thing is look for the ping pong balls. What the hell are you talking about? He says, you'll see. So we're flying over this operation. We're working for 173rd Airborne, I guess, at that time. And they were getting fire from somewhere. So he said, we're going to go spot. And we fly in low. And he said, look out. And then I see it. And like I said, the tracer rounds. Now, if you're flying over like this and they're shooting from here, when it gets to you, it goes boom, like that. But as it's coming up, for a few seconds, it looks like a white, because there's the tracer stuff on it. So it looks like a white ping pong ball almost floating up at you. So when I first saw, I said, ping pong ball over, and I pointed to where it was. He said, now you know what they are. I said, yeah.
Terry, actually, can you show us that photo of the tracer and
Oh, yeah.
tell us about that?
This is a gunship, it's called, and it has on it miniguns, which fire like 1,000 rounds a minute. So this is only like a second exposure of that, hitting a target out near where we were, going up. We called it, again, Puff the Magic Dragon. That was a popular song, and that became it. And they could either have miniguns in in regular transport planes. Most of the time they were in helicopters, and they would just zap an area. They said they could fill a football field every square inch within 2 or 3 minutes, every part of it, at the most 2 minutes. So these were, they were called Spooky or Puff the Magic Dragon. And these were called in a lot. Luckily, I was never in the area below it, so. As you find out from this one, we were getting fire. In the Trang, you always knew it was either the 18th or 19th of the month, because the VC shelled the Trang, and we would, hide in somewhere, but they came all the time. This was one of the operations where they pinpointed what they thought was the enemy, who was throwing in R-40, B-40 rockets and stuff. But it turned out to be a water buffalo. After the after-action report, they spent all this, probably $50,000 to kill this water buffalo. But the VC farmer who owned the water buffalo was probably doing the shooting, but that's all they got out of it.
Incredible. How long did you stay in Vietnam? How long was
I was there, I should have been 12, but I was there 13 months. I was trained, my replacement didn't get there on time, so I spent another month and a half in country over the year's time that I should have been there. Same with the guy who preceded me, spent an extra month and a half too training me, Jeffrey D.K. Bloom with an E, he always would say. He's from up in Riverside Drive, nice guy. But yeah, about almost 14.
What were the housing arrangements like? Did you where you slept and where you ate? Were they?
I was very lucky. My main, unless I was out somewhere, but we had a villa. I say villa, it was probably the size of this, a little smaller, on the street, across the street from where I showed you those kids. It's me. yeah, it was across the street from this, where these kids that I knew really well. We had this villa. There were 4 of us, officers, who had rooms there, and then we had a guard out front. But we had a Korean MP compound right next to us, so nobody messed with the Koreans. They were excellent. They were probably the best troops there at that time, I thought. But we had the Hmong guard, and that was it. Water tower up back to take your shower under. And we ate either at the Special Forces headquarters up there, where they had like a Pizza Hut and a Carvel type things and everything up there, or at the main fort.
Why do you say the Koreans were the best?
They had taken the American military operations manuals after the Korean War was over, and we occupied Korea for all of that time. Actually, one of my roommates from OCS ended up in Korea. But and they took it and they did exactly what it said. If you were out with Americans and it said dig a hole a meter deep to put up barbed wire or something, so the Americans would like then that's it, jam the thing in there. Koreans would go a meter. They would do everything as the book said and do it 110%. And they partied the same way. I love, because we're next door and I got to know a lot of them. I ate a lot of Korean food, and I drank a lot of Korean wine, ginseng wine, which they said was ginseng wine, but it was like alcohol. And then after you do it a few times, you end up eating the ginseng with the bottle. It was like tequila with the worm in the old days.
But they had a piece of ginger, a ginseng inside.
Yeah, but they were so good about doing things, and they partied and worked very, very
so you
hard.
talked about partying. So what did you do when you weren't working, like on the base or?
And in the Trang, we would just go out to a bar that was in the area, the Green Door, I think it was called. Be out on the streets, gambling. I don't have any pictures. This is a gambling game that you can play. It's got a mat with chickens and different things on it. You roll dice and that. Go out and eat food off the streets if they were there. The ladies coming by. Hi, Vitlom. I'll never forget. That's who wants duck eggs. Mm-hmm. And that call was infamous. And duck eggs, they would come with 2 things, with duck eggs on one side and candles on the other. And they'd light the candle, they'd put the duck egg up
To show
the candle
you.
and see that the embryo is just formed.
Yes.
Just formed.
Yes.
And you crack off the head and you suck that down. So I got used to doing that.
Did you have one of these?
Yeah, I had things that I didn't want to necessarily always eat there.
I know in Philippines it's called balu. What was the name? Do you remember the name of it in
Vetlom.
Vietnam?
Vetlom.
Yeah.
Duck egg. Hi, Vetlom, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped in Subic Bay, by the way, on the way over with that troop ship. If you know the Philippines, the Subic Bay was where there was an American Navy base. So that was a rough time.
Yeah, my husband was in the Navy, so he was there.
So they were going to Vietnam, so the guys who got off the ship, we lost probably 10 guys there, never came back to the ship, but the others were totally drunk or doing whatever when they got back. But it's a hellhole. It's not a nice place.
So there were no cell phones then. So did you communicate with your family, or how did you?
Yeah, I had a girlfriend at the time who, toward the end of my career, announced that we were getting married, which I never talked to her about, but it was a whole different world.
She informed you.
Yeah, but we had you could write. It was all free mail, but you could also go to. If you had one, a USO, when I'd go to Saigon, I used to have to go to Saigon once a month to make reports from the zone I was in, and that was a great time down there. But you could phone call to the United States, the MARS system, Mobile Air Relay System, you could call. And the first call I was to my sister, the young one back in East Norwich, and while I was waiting for it all to be relayed, I started talking to the guy, and he said he's a ham operator. I said, where are you from? He said Phoenix, Arizona. I said, oh, I have family in Phoenix. He said, oh yeah. I said, oh, that's the home of Goldwater, right? Barry Goldwater. He said, yeah. I said, oh yeah. He does a lot. He said, that's me. So it's Barry Goldwater. He did that service while he was a senator. Every once in a while, he had time.
Really?
He may have lied to me.
Wow.
I don't know, but he sounded like And he would transfer the calls to the East Coast from his ham radio or Mars radio station. But that was a way to contact the United States. And then you had 1 week off, R&R, rest and relaxation. So
Did you
married.
stay there, or you came back?
No, I didn't come. You couldn't go back to the world, as we called it. That's what the United States was called, the GI, the world. I'm going back to the world. You could go to Hawaii if you were married and meet your wife.
Okay.
Otherwise, you could go Australia, Thailand, wherever you want. I had been flying in and out of Thailand a few times anyway, so I didn't want to go there. So I went to Hong Kong. One of my translators was his family was from Hong Kong, and he was from Hong Kong. He didn't have to go into the military, into a combat zone. He was drafted, but you didn't have to serve in combat. But he chose to become combat. So he said, Samuel Leon, and he said his family still lived in Hong Kong. They had a tour system. So he hooked me up with his family. They hooked me up with a tailor, so I could buy, looking like James Bond, who was, a 3-piece suit for like $25. So I spent a week in Hong Kong, and it was really nice. Learned a lot about Hong Kong.
So how did the wartime experience change you as a person?
Probably questioning the authenticity of what my government was doing, questioning the greed of people like, it would have been Halliburton today, Cheney's old company, doing the Middle East and stuff. But then it was PA&E, Pacific Architects and Engineers, and KM&E or something. But they were making a fortune, just so much money, and the black market was rife. And so the whole thing just put a bad taste in my mouth for trusting what the government was saying and belief that we should do anything else but go to war, certainly. And I think a lot of GIs, would advise anybody, don't go to war, if you can avoid it. If America was attacked, I would do whatever I could to help, but I don't see that. We're being attacked from within, but other than that, I would just say the war is, hopefully we'll get over that as a people, as Earthlings.
Yeah.
That was the biggest part for me, was just getting that idea that this is wrong, this whole idea is wrong. I know it has to happen in certain cases, but unless it's the last thing and not just some political motivation or money motivation, I could understand. But so that was probably the biggest change.
A lot of people felt that in the United States too. I mean, there was all those anti-war protests for
Well, that's why coming back, and I ended up with the Vietnam veterans and doing the moratorium, and I was teaching. I got a little job at Oyster Bay High School right after I came back. I was going to graduate school and bartending, and working at Brookville Cemetery. So pretty busy, but as a member of the Oyster Bay faculty, one of my friends and we started in East Norwich with a pacifist, parade into Oyster Bay, the peace marchers, and give peace a chance. And we're walking down past that was then a bowling alley in the middle of Pine Hollow. And there were the students we knew from school, and they're booing and calling us commies and everything. And he had been a Korean War veteran, a Marine Corps captain. And so that was a little rough until I talked to the kids, and a couple days later, I think it was on a Friday we did this, and then Monday I talked to those boys. So I said, well, let me explain why we're doing it. They kind of listened. I don't know if they got it. But.
A lot of people came back, they had psychological issues. I guess they would have been more the people, you were lucky you weren't in combat. I guess those were the guys that were in combat more. But do you feel like it put it psychologically strain on you?
I think probably, other than the fact that it changed my idea of what patriotism probably is. And for a while, it was difficult to deal with loud noises. I mean, I was around enough things going on. I didn't luckily have to, like I said, shoot. I only shot my weapon a couple times. I never saw anybody, luckily. I wouldn't want to. But coming back, noises used to scare me for a little while. I think that happens to anybody who's been through tense situations. But coming back to America also, we landed in Oakland. We got off, and the first thing we did, processed out, listened to the booze and the baby killer stuff. And then we went to a restaurant, three friends of mine, and we're sitting there, and we ordered the food. And in Vietnam, you get used to eating quick, because you don't know what's going to happen, when something could come into your campus. So we're like, and we all finished with like 2 minutes, and it's just complete silence in the restaurant. And we look around, and everybody's like, I said, I guess we're back in the States, huh? I said, we got to learn how to live again.
Back to the world.
So you're making an adjustment. I stayed in California for a month. I didn't come home because the anti-war, that battle was going on so much. I didn't want to get in the middle of that. So I stayed with a guy who had come back earlier from Vietnam. So it took me about a month to feel comfortable coming. I was fine with my family, but people asking questions and stuff. And then it was so negative. When I started applying for jobs, I learned early, never put down that you were a Vietnam veteran. Because if you did, these people read it as, well, you must be either on drugs. Well, I saw pot there. I never smoked it because there was very little then. I think as the war winds down, in the 70s, there was a lot more because there was so much free time. But they think you were a drug addict or had, they didn't call it PTSD then, but, were crazy from being in Vietnam. So it's generally you did not say anything about your experience there if you wanted to get a job. For whatever reason, it was kind of negative to get jobs.
So that's that was the connotation if you put down that you were in the service.
Yeah, it was. But we weren't welcome, and that's why when I taught AmeriCorps War, a course that I developed, and I'd get veterans. Could get the Vietnamese guys pretty easy. The World War II guys, the Koreans guys, it was so hard to get them to come and speak to the classes because the forgotten war, they weren't welcomed home the same way as we were not. But my older brothers and sisters, my sister wasn't in the war, but my older brothers were. They came back to parades and parties and everything.
You're talking from World War II.
Yeah, from World War II.
Yeah,
For
right.
me, it was like, I don't know if you ever saw The Deer Hunter, that movie. Remember how he hides out for a while and just goes by the parties and he doesn't want involved. That's the way, many of us felt at that point. It's going to take a time to get back in.
Were you affected by Agent Orange?
Yes. I ended up with ischemic heart and type 2 diabetes. And one of the things I do when I do see veterans, I encourage them, have you done this? Have you been out to the VA? Have you had checks for this? If they say they're sick, and I know some that have type 2 diabetes and were on the ground soldiers. I said, look, go, get paid. So you were there, and you may have or may not have gotten type 2 diabetes because of your lifestyle. But if you have it and there's a connection, they will pay you a disability because you're going to have this the rest of your life. So those are the two problems. I never got wounded over there, luckily.
You said you were shot at, though.
Yeah, and rockets coming in on us, but it wasn't that often, and I never got anything. Saw a lot of people shot and had to work with a lot of people to develop these leaflets like that one that I showed. This one. So, and then we developed a leaflet like this. So in situations like that, you might have getting shot at and around that while the medics were coming in. They'll be firing in different places.
Oh, my goodness.
Generally never very close, and I was never worried. I had a lot of people there with me most of the time. The only other time I was out without many other Americans was I was working with the Montagnard people. We'd go to the villages with those teams, and it would just be myself and Sergeant Toe and another Montagnard interpreter. But they had 700 different languages, dialects of 5 or 6 major Montagnard languages. So I had that. And there I felt nervous because there was myself, my Korean counterpart, Song Byung Taek. So we had no special forces, no 173rd. It was just you and the teams out there. But I shouldn't say the yards. We called them yards instead of Montagnards. One of our first job was to get rid of the term Moi. Moi meant dirty savage from the hills. So as the worst offensive words you could think of any religious group or a racial group you could think of, Moi was as bad as they could get. And so we got the Constitution to say no communications again can ever use this term.
Oh,
But
wow,
they
so it
were
was a slur.
so wonderful. The people were just absolutely beautiful people. When we got these guys back from the slave labor camp, they came to the Special Forces hut, and in there, it was a hut. It was a place this size, I guess. It was a small headquarters, and we had a couch and a television. They used to broadcast like combat on television and news, right? So we get Mon Quang and a couple of them in there, and they're small people. They're generally like not very small. They all jump up on the couch. They had never seen a couch. They had been slaves from VC for 15, 20 years, so never TV, mechanically, just getting them into helicopters. They were so afraid. And they're jumping up on the couch, and it was just a riot to watch. And then somebody put the TV on, and they were like, and they all ran over and started speaking to the TV, trying to get communication. But they were the most beautiful, wonderful people. In a Vietnamese village, if you took a bunch of stuff in, all the kids came and grabbed what they could. And we understood, that's fine. The Montagnard village, you put everything out, the chief say, okay, now this family, take this family. They're very ordered and wonderful. And so we would do medical or dental work with them, or a doctor would be with us maybe, or we would just go and talk to them, trying to convince them to help us and not the enemy. And they didn't care about who the enemy or whatever. They just wanted to be around people who would give them some freedom. But we used to show a film at the beginning, and the turtle and the rabbit, you know, the race, you know, the
Right.
turtle.
Oh, yeah, the turtle and the
every
hare,
culture
yes,
has that
yes.
story. I'm reading now a book about how that such a wide story. But we showed a
Universal.
Disney film or something, and the beginning of the film, the turtle's like going along, and the rabbit comes up and sticks his hand out, and the turtle
Yeah.
goes to shake it, and the rabbit goes like this and laughs and said, well, every time we showed it in the village, they loved it. The whole Boone we'd have to shut the projector down, turn the generator off. The Boone would line up, kids, grandpa, and they'd come up. I'd have to stick out my hand, and you know,
Yeah.
they'd put out their hand. I'd go, and they'd go, ah, every
reenact.
one of them. It was so funny.
That's hilarious.
But delightful, wonderful people.
Have you been back to Vietnam?
No, I haven't.
Because
I-
now it's a hot destination. Before COVID, it was a hot destination.
Yeah, oh
spot.
yeah. I had students, I taught at Cold Spring Harbor, and I had several students who had gone over to Vietnam, some to do work, church projects or charity projects, and some just to visit. And they would always bring me back stuff as souvenirs
Do you
and
have
things
any
and tell me.
desire to go there and see?
They wanted to go.
Do you?
I was years ago. I wanted to see what happened to some people that I left who were dear friends who I don't know that they lived once the Northerners took over, because they had very sensitive jobs. So you wonder about their fate. That's all. I had a lot. It was tough leaving. You know, when you work that long and you're that close to the people, you build up a lot of friendships.
And you were there a long time. I mean,
So
it was a year's a long
yeah,
time.
and with those people, my interpreters were wonderful people. I used to go to parties and I had a great time, and there were a lot of tears just leaving. But again, I got very fortunate. I had a job that allowed me to bring away many good things. Some negative, but you know, you kind of push those, like your childhood. You kind of push those real negative things over to the side as much as you do.
Have you remained friends with anybody that you have met in Vietnam? You know, like
No.
from the States?
No, I did for a while from the GIs that I knew and guys who worked with me, but that's probably been 20 years since the last time I talked to anybody. See, we don't have any reunions as a unit, because all of us were within our War battalion. The battalion was minuscule compared to regular battalion, and then you were detached out. So I might be with the 173rd Airborne File, the 5th Special Forces most of my time, but so we didn't have a unit that had anything. And I look at the reunion pages in the vet magazines I get, and there's never anything for War. But I don't know. I don't even know if we'd
Would you
have
go?
anything in common. I might. I'm not sure. You know, I had considered it more, certainly more 10 years ago. And especially when my students came back and were bringing me little souvenirs that I had told them stories about things, and they'd bring me back a little snake in the bottle type thing, or a special bracelets. And so I might have then, but my kids came along. I was working, career, and you know, you get busy.
Did you
And-
join any
Go ahead.
veteran organizations?
Yeah, I was an American Legion, and I only joined American Legion for one of my son's scholarships. I tell everybody it was a greedy thing, but I knew it was an okay organization, so I joined the Locust Valley one, and I stayed with them for years, and then I joined the VFW down here, the post down here. I hardly ever go to any meetings anymore, though. Of course, with COVID, they were mostly called off. But I also have political reasons for not going to the American Legion as much. I kind of tend to be left of center, I guess. They tend, most of them, to be very right of center. Whereas the VFW, they just kind of don't give a damn. You know, they go in, have a short meeting, and have some drinks and just BS with each other. The Legion does all this political activity stuff, and it got further and further right. So I like some of the guys, but it's not easy. You know, I'm sure you've all been through experiences where you're just not that comfortable anymore with things. But
Yeah,
those are the
I
the
know what you're
groups.
saying.
Yeah, it's
And
hard.
now politically things have gotten more out of control than ever, and it's really hard when someone doesn't feel like you feel like it's.
Oh yeah, and their families too. I know so many
I
families.
know.
My son in Tennessee, but it's tough. And being in this job and trained in War, I believe strictly in freedom of the press, but I'm highly angry at all of our media now. They just do anything to sell time and make money, and they do stories that aren't checked out and honest. That's the most critical thing to me, because I know the power of this psychological warfare stuff, and I see it on television all the time. So that's got me scared. I think I'm more scared of that than anything.
Well, as a veteran, as a teacher, you know, what would you like future generations to learn from this interview?
Just
Yeah.
to treat everybody as an earthling and respect people's as much as you can. And war has to be an absolute last resort, not for all, trade reasons or threat of this and that, but really when there's an invasion and you have to do something to save yourself or your family, okay. But other than that, I'm very anti-war. That's it.
Well, Terry, thank you so much
Oh, thank you.
for participating
I hope I didn't ramble
in our
too much.
project.
Oh my God, this was terrific. I learned so many new things.
Oh, good. I was going to show you this. This
Yes.
this was the 5th Battalion that I worked with in Vietnam, and this is what badge we had to wear in and out of the huts. And this was Korean and Vietnamese and American, and this was given to this was what we had to wear to work. So thought I'd bring that along. But I don't know if there's anything else I can tell you. I don't think there's any other
This
picture I didn't
picture is
explain.
a little disturbing too. This girl with the baby looks like she's 10 years old.
Yeah, they look very
Uh,
young.
They, number one, they were very young looking. All Vietnamese are, you might say, oh, he's probably 45 or 35, and he could be 60. I swear
Oh.
they do look very young, and the Montagnards particularly.
Right,
They
and
look-
you
you know,
said
it's
she's very
small.
little. She's very little.
She is tiny, yeah, and she hadn't had that baby that long ago. It was so good when we got that news. Mom, Gwen, baby and wife are fine. So, it's a great thing to hear. It's wonderful.
And in your other picture, you were talking about that there was in the village with a white child.
Yes, Robé.
Why were where did these children come from? That they're walking.
From GIs who had gone by that time 4 or 5 years. I guess he's around 4 then, I forget. That was a big problem, the Eurasian children who were there. The French Eurasian children, there were lots of those, but they were kind of accepted. But I think when Americans started ending up, and they particularly didn't like American black and Asian children. They were very prejudiced against that, because they were prejudiced against the Montagnards, so they had this prejudice, a lot of the Vietnamese. But Robé, the great kid, he belonged to what we had to call it the Bao Mui Lang gang, with all the kids on the block.
Interesting.
This is my accommodations.
Oh, let's see.
That's
And this is when I had time off. The Duitan Hotel.
Is
We'd
this
go up
you,
to
Terry?
that plaza
Yes,
and we would
Terry.
watch
This
movies.
is you?
Yeah, back in the day, and then my mosquito netting, which was the most important part of everything there.
How old were you? Yeah, 18. 19.
No, I was probably 23, 22, I guess. And this is our, every Sunday when we could, they had, Matrang is a beautiful old city, and it has immaculate beaches and islands. And Entree Island was where Key, Nguyen Cao Key, Vice President, President at the time, he had his summer palace at the end of this, going out on Cold Spring, not in Cold Spring, but Center Island, out on this peninsula. And that beach was near there. But one of the caretakers was married to one of my interpreters, called Wang. So we used to get to go to Key's Palace on weekends too. But we would have beach parties there at that beach all the time. And that was my Korean compound guy, I think, I don't know if he's in there.
So can I ask one more personal question? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So you said you had a girlfriend
Yeah.
there. So what happened to the girlfriend, and how did you meet your wife?
The girlfriend, I didn't like the fact that I was getting letters from friends saying, oh, when's the wedding date? And I hadn't arranged anything about that. So when I got back, we had a big conversation. And I had changed too. So I wasn't ready, and we just kind of drifted apart until I was teaching at Oyster Bay High School. I got a call one morning. She was having troubles, and she was living in the city. I had to go into the city, help her out, and then come back, and then go back in the city with a tour that I was taking with the kids. So we just split apart after a while, and then I met my wife several years later through a friend.
A setup.
A setup?
Was it a setup?
No. I was running I was running a program for Locust Valley High School at the time for what to do with the teenagers, and so they opened up a rec, we called it the rec, at the basement of the town hall in Babel. So one of the kids was Frankie, and his sister came to pick him up with my future wife, Kathy, and they were there, and I met her then. And we just hit it off, and she claims that I met her the previous year in Southampton, but she and Marietta both recalled that I wasn't making much sense, and I had my penny loafer in my mouth, and it was. I said, I don't remember any of that. They swore that happened, but No,
So how
I was
long-
out there drinking a lot in those days.
So how long are you married for?
Oh, God, 1980. So we got married. Yeah. We lived together.
So that's 42 years, yeah.
Yeah, we lived together for about 6 years or 7 years, mostly in Colorado.
Well, Terry's coming back for his second part of the
Oh, yeah, I
interview.
have the other part.
Yeah, so
What-
we're
I'm sorry, what
we're
time is
looking
it?
forward to
It
having
is
you
10
then.
o'clock.
Oh,
11.
plenty of time.
Yeah.
I don't want to take your time, but my wife has to go meet somebody.
Oh.
She's worked in schools and as a library assistant, and she did that for years, which she absolutely loved. But she's also a medium, so she does
Oh, is she?
healings and readings. You know, very limited, but she does that. So she's got to do something with I can't think of her name. The lady in town, they're getting together to do something. She was just honored by got a what the heck's her name? She is a medium also. It's for the Spanish community mostly. She's from Spain. But anyway, she's going to meet together, so I have to get back by 12.
Okay.
So, I
Terry,
didn't know how
again,
long.
just thank you so much for participating
Oh,
in
I
this
hope you
project.
got whatever you
Oh, this is
Yeah,
needed.
wonderful.
yeah, thank
Oh,
you, thank you.
You're
So,
welcome.
end it here.
Yeah.